Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, where you are in the world today. I am Rabbi Dr. Silver Captain Woodley von Rothschild. Today we have a new name. We're no longer the world today, we're now New Day News. And with me today, a special welcome to Susan, Dr. Susan Englander. Dr. Susan Englander. Dr. Susan Englander is Dr. Susan Englander is a former professor at SS State University, San Francisco State University, and also former professor at City College. Dr. Englander, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is such an honor to follow the grand list of people who have appeared on your show.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for being here. Um, Looking at I know that you one of your main area of expertise has been women's history in America. It's been a very interesting history. Could you give us the talk about the history of women in America going back to say the 1800s up to now?
It's been very interesting. Um, in one sense, like many histories, um, the history of women have has gone forward and backward, has risen and fallen. Um, Women have been treasured and reviled, and currently, with the current, let me just go forward quickly to the current president, where women's rights is under threat. But even in the early 1800s, women had more rights than they do now. So, for instance, um, beginning in 1807, women had the right to vote in the state of New Jersey, because, as many of you may know, um, until the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution were passed, uh, voting was regulated by the single states. And now there are federal amendments to the federal Constitution that make it regulated, or at least allowed and insisted upon by federal authority. So this is a big move forward for women. Um, Women really, in a lot of ways, experimented outside of the law, outside of the Constitution, in terms of custom and purpose. So, for instance, women's fashion has been gone from very free to very restricted and back. Women's accepted behavior has also been on a spectrum. So, to me, as Dr. Rothschild, as Rabbi Rothschild has said, um, the um, the history has been quite fascinating, and it was the first thing that I was opened to when I went back to graduate school. I have been a feminist all my life. However, to be able to study these issues means that you have to be open to the other side in order to truly learn what is going on to and for women. And that has been both a joy and a terrible revelation. So, and even now I was actually talking about this at dinner last night with another former student. We were talking about the fact that he is now a teacher. We're still students. We still study. We still learn. And in a very subtle and hopefully helpful way, I continue to try to pass on information and knowledge. There is a difference. Information, knowledge, wisdom to other people so that they can continue to absorb, learn, and profit. I really feel as though that's the goal of my life overall is um, to be someone who bears information, knowledge, and wisdom.
You mentioned that you are a feminist. Could you explain to us what's a feminist?
When I became 18 years old, I realized that many things were not either allowed or frowned upon for women. And that really distressed me because, I thought, well, I'm an individual. And feminism does not necessarily have anything to do with me. My rights as a woman are self defined, they are what I want for myself. But then I banged up against the social and political reality of women's lives. And this was in the early 1970s. And so I said, wow. And I met other like minded women when I was in college, many women actually, and then in nursing school. And they had a varying view of rights, entitlements. Some of them, some of my friends did not want to be allied with feminism at all because they found it too intimidating. They said, it makes me look like a man hater if I only want women's rights. And other women said, well, no, um, we're all entitled in life to the same things, but we have to go out and seize it. It doesn't just come to us. So feminism is, in fact, women and some men who believe in it going out and seizing their rights and assisting others in seizing their rights. And that's where I think men come in because they can say, no, I don't have to treat you like a person on a pedestal. I can treat you like a human being. What a concept.
Yes, indeed. Um, you and it's interesting. I was reading that in the, I think it was in the, as you mentioned previously, history of women. It went back and forth, went from more liberated dressing to very restrictive dressing to back to more liberated dressing. But also, it's been brought to my attention that in the what the 60s, women couldn't own a credit card or a bank account. Talk to us about that. That's wild.
Now, this is very interesting. Most women in American society are married, and that is the defining framework. If you are married, you can only have a bank, you could, oh, sorry, you could only have a bank account, have a credit card, and other forms of access if your husband gave you permission.
Mm.
And for single women, that does not apply because there are no laws that say that. There is only, but there are laws defining marriage as there were laws defining marriage as men in control of women. So a number of us pushed back against these laws, fought against them. There was also in some states you could not divorce without your husband's permission. Excuse me. So all of these things added up, depending on where you live, depending on who your relationships were, with a very repressive life. And many of us said, no more. Forget about it.
Well, yeah,
And I
because
spelled, forget about
yeah,
it.
because what
Yeah,
if the woman is in an abusive relationship? They're stuck in. How do they get out of that?
too true. Too true. You and I, Catherine, have been free women.
Hey, amen. Amen. to Let me divert back to it's interesting. Like for example, I remember back in the 1800s, there were women that were very rich,
That's right.
and then and then from there. But was there a difference between say white women like us or on say on minority women?
That's right. Yes.
Could you talk to us about
Yes.
that?
Life has been very much. You and I speak as very privileged people or women of color, and it doesn't matter. Whether you're open to being a person of color, when it's obvious that you're a person of color, that your life was restricted just by virtue of your appearance, because that's what color is. Now, there are cultures that go along with color. I'm not saying, oh, it's just a look, but it's appearance that had restricted lives. Men's lives who were people of color were restricted as well. So um, there's a saying, um, it casts a pall on you. And what that means is that you are covered with a veil. You are covered with a film, which is a pall. We're all born with a film around us, and the mother breaks through the caul to release the life of her child. So we have all been uh, we've all been under that pall. Only women, however, in terms of culture, politics, society, continued to live under that pall.
All right, right. That's really
Oh, I'm sorry, call. Yes.
okay. Excellent. So let's talk about the right to vote. Um, that started about in 1920s, correct?
Mhm. Yes. And as I mentioned before, um, a number of states like New Jersey gave women the right to vote in the early 1800s. However, they withdrew it because states could do that. They could play around with people's rights. So, on the whole, uh, for most of our history, and I'm going to say as both Americans and as United States citizens and people, our rights as people, women, have been defined by outside forces, and we have fought. And in 1921, the federal right to vote, which also meant the state right to vote,
Mm-hmm.
with an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So the fact that we could do it, the fact that we could
Mm-hmm.
pursue that, was a very important step. And the two women who, first of all, initiated and perpetuated that struggle were Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Actually, Stanton brought Susan B. Anthony along.
Mm-hmm.
Stanton was
Right.
the first woman, first of all, not only to pursue the right to vote, but to write a Bible that was illuminating for women.
Well, interesting. I'm also curious in regards to women being able to uh, run for office. Um, when did they start allowing that?
The 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 vote. There are several names for the vote. The vote, suffrage, the franchise, and the franchise encompasses all aspects of voting, all aspects of being able both to run and to vote. And so, really, when women got the right to vote in 1920, they also got the right to the franchise.
Okay.
to run for office. And as I said, Elizabeth Cady Stanton ran for president in the 1800s.
Okay.
And she was attacked in the street for doing this. It was considered an offense, a criminal offense to do this.
But but I find that strange because these same people read the Bible, and in the Bible we had Deborah, who was a judge, was at one point the leader of Israel as a judge, and there were many women prophets in the Bible. So they're being, as we say, selective. Uh, cherry picking verses from that suits them, and then get rid of the ones that don't suit them. But it's clear as day in the Bible, in the book of Judges. They had different periods and different judges that ruled over the people. And at one point there was Deborah, who was not on that part, but also the judge of all of Israel.
Now Sarah, who was Abraham's wife, mainly gained power from the fact that she was Abraham's wife. However, Judith and Deborah had really obtained power in their own right, seized power. So the Bible itself, I agree, has very good examples of forceful women, activist women, and women who lived their entitlements.
Excellent. Talk to us about education for women, and I think that's also been a very strange dichotomy in American history, because could you talk about that? Well, women's right to get an education in America. When did it really expand, and what was the dynamics behind that?
Absolutely, because it's very interesting that the college I went to was one of the first two colleges to allow women to attend. The first college was Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio, and I believe it began to admit women in 1868. And my own college, Ohio Wesleyan University, which at the time was a Methodist college, began to admit women as following Oberlin's example in the 1870s. So before then, I should also tell you a little bit about the history. I will be very brief.
No problem.
The history of education, was that there weren't even high schools for many until the late 1800s. So neither men nor women advanced beyond beyond grammar school. Then high schools came into being. Only men were admitted first, and then women. And finally, in the late 1900s, some, as I said, they were following the examples of Oberlin and Ohio Wesleyan to admit women. So by the early 20th century, I believe this striving for education really was at the forefront of women winning the right to vote.
Interesting. And how about in terms of teaching at the university level? When did they start allowing women to do that?
That's very interesting. The women's colleges emerged in the late 1800s. Smith, Wellesley, what are called the Seven Sisters, the first colleges for women. And Wellesley has now merged with Harvard, but Radcliffe is still a separate college. Smith is still a separate college because they want to preserve the women-only feature. And these colleges led the way to what's called the integration of women into higher education at the college level, not just high schools, but college. So, everything, I use the word struggle very loosely just because there are people today who are struggling for food, for water, for their very lives. So I do not take that word lightly. However, the effort, I would like to say, the effort to integrate women into education, into the public sphere, was also, a concerted effort.
Um, just to wrap, where do you see women going from here? Because now we're not in the 21st century, but in some countries, women are being brutalized and abused on all kind of nonsense. But in this country, thank goodness, women still has the right to speak, the right to protest, the right to right to pursue an education, own property. Where do you see what women's going from here?
I wish I had a copy at hand right now, but in 1970, a very uh, uh, influential book came out called Sisterhood is Powerful.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is, the book mainly referred to white US women. And it seemed as though other women, women of color, women in other countries, were invisible. And so, about 10 years later, a book emerged that was called International Sisterhood is Powerful,
Hmm.
which then uh, really forcefully put all women uh, at the center of this effort, put all women as needing to struggle with each other, to give each other their rights. And I think that is a very powerful statement. Again, our rights ebb and flow, but they don't flow unless we make it happen.
Yeah, that's so true because I know in our Jewish culture, being as a white European Jew, and in our culture, education has always been promoted, and everybody has always been able to read and write, and with that we've been we as a group have been very successful. I mean, there's only 15 million, what 10 million of us in the world, yet I mean we're basically thank goodness through hard work we're the like 60% of the professors and like 40% of the billionaires and millionaires and billionaires, which is phenomenal. And it's thanks because of our culture we promote education and knowledge. So give us your words of encouragement going forward for women in this country.
Well, I just want to use my own experience and my own lived experience as an example in my synagogue back in Kingston, New York. Um, Rabbi Rael Romer was the first female rabbi in our temple. And unfortunately, I cannot remember the name of the first female cantor. But women now can be religious leaders and can study to be religious leaders, can go to, for instance, the Reform Rabbi uh, University in Cincinnati, Ohio. So, as with everything else, women really moved to be able to seek those educations.
Yeah, because it's interesting. The apart from the reform, there's also the Reconstructionists, the conservative, and now even there's been one or two Orthodox rabbi in the Sephardic realm, and
Yeah.
even also that there have been some rabbis that must say who have been ordained through other means. But the point is that we are recapturing the whole concept of Deborah, the judge, and the path that she laid for us, and the
And I
example.
might also say that my mother's side of the family were Lutheran. They were not Jewish.
Hmm.
I'm what's called mixed.
Okay.
And I grew up with with my grandparents to the Lutheran church with a male minister,
Hmm.
and it was just assumed that Reverend Gates at Redeemer Lutheran Church was the only head that the church could have. Even at that church, there are women who are ministers. Love it.
Well, Dr. Susan, it's a pleasure as always having you in this conversation. It was a very fruitful conversation. I like it very much, and once again, thank you for taking the time to be with us today on our new show here. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, indeed. And it's a pleasure. And Susan, it's a pleasure having you again. And hope to see you again soon. All right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.